Crowhill here. Today we're reviewing a pumpkin ale and discussing some horror stories. Hey, good evening.
Good.
Longinus.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Well, how about some beer and conversation?
Yeah, that's a good idea. What's on your mind, Bigweed?
Well, a shipwreck.
Okay.
Teleportation.
Yeah.
Scary grandma. Cancer, and a raft.
Okay, I see. It must be time for P&C's shortcut to the classics.
Yes, where we read great books by the world's great authors, provided that they aren't too long.
Exactly. And today we're discussing some short stories by Stephen King.
Yes, from his collection, Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, but okay. But first I got to get into this beer.
Yes.
Because this looks kind of interesting.
Well, it's Halloween. That's why we're doing scary stories.
Yes.
And that's why it's pumpkin beer season.
Okay, yeah.
But since I'm not a great fan of pumpkin beer,
beers.
I figured if we jack up the ABV
That would cover
and
for it?
throw a little caramel in there.
Okay, yeah. Southern Tier Caramel Pumking Imperial Pumpkin Ale.
All right.
8.6%.
That's 8.6.
That's pretty serious.
Right. I always thought Southern Tier was in the South, but it's in upstate New York.
Now, the thing that always gets me about these flavored beers is some of them taste like they've got artificial stuff. Like somebody grabbed the extract off the grocery store counter and put it in. So that's going to be my big question here.
Does it taste like caramel or
does
caramel?
it taste like pretend garbage?
Right.
Let's find out.
Let me know if it's
Interesting aroma.
Yes, you can definitely get some caramel from the aroma, but it's it's lovely in color. Oh, caramel all over the place.
Caramel all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to tell. It doesn't taste fake. It doesn't have that phony.
But does it
fat.
taste genuine?
There's a medicine-iness to that fake.
Bit,
yeah. To fake
which I don't
flavors.
Well, I'm not getting the medicine-ness, but I am getting a very strong caramel flavor.
Which is good, and some pumpkin, but pumpkin by itself doesn't taste like pumpkin.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite, but hey, this is pretty good.
Okay,
Plus,
it's
at
interesting.
8.6.
It's very strongly caramel. If you like caramel, you might enjoy this.
That's right.
Okay, so Stephen King. What do we know about Stephen King?
Well, he first off, I don't know how many shortcuts to the classics we've done. I mean, a couple dozen at least.
Yeah.
He's our only living author so far.
Oh, okay.
So he's alive
really?
in 1947, and unless Kurt Vonnegut, is he?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
All right. That's
If not,
he's question. Gotta go through the list of books and see who on here is still alive.
Born in 1947 in Maine, still lives in Maine. Went to the University of Maine.
Okay.
A lot, very what do you call it, New England centric.
Okay.
Makes Maine seem like a spooky state.
Okay.
Kind of fun.
Yeah.
And boy, in 1973 he wrote Carrie. So here you're in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
You write a hugely successful novel, which in 3 years is a hugely successful film, and you think you could have rested on your laurels if you wanted to. And
Well, what are you going to do? Just sit around and eat bonbons for the rest of your life?
But some guys are one-hit wonders.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You swing for the fences, you hit a big one, and that's your thing. But boy, that guy can't stop himself.
He's written so many books.
He's such a writer. I mean, that's what he is, and to the bone. And he's going to write every day until he can't.
And it's
Well, he
interesting
does.
if you look at the sales of books, like Stephen King sells more books than like the next 20 authors combined. He's amazing.
I saw Carrie for the
I think
first
he's a
time
jerk,
this week.
but he's amazing.
He's a bit of a jerk. And because it was like 1976, which for an R-rated movie might have been was a little ahead of my time. And then by the time I got old enough to see it, I just never did until this week. And it's very solid.
Okay.
And I also watched Christine. That's pretty good too.
Okay. All right. Well,
I saw that recently.
see, I'll have to watch those sometime when Mrs. Crowhill is.
Yeah, it's not really
away.
her
She
thing.
does not like horror stuff at all. She's like, why are you reading Stephen King? Well, we're doing it for the show.
So yes, I guess that's it. He's super prolific.
Yeah.
400 million sold or something.
Like you go to the airport and you're definitely going to see Stephen King on the road.
All right, so I looked up, his bibliography.
Yeah.
Hasn't written a gigantic 600 pager in a couple years, but he's got like 6 short stories that are out this year.
Okay.
He's still
just still writing,
still banging them out.
Yeah.
Okay, so this collection is his second. I think the first one is Nightmares and Dreamscapes.
Okay.
And this one is mid '80s.
Yeah.
But some of them actually go back to the '60s, right?
So I'm seeing 82, 84, 81, 82, and 81. No,
Okay.
all 80s and
Right. No, I mean this contains The Mist, which is about 150 pages. That was a movie, and another 20 short stories
Okay.
from various ages. But it is released in the mid '80s and looks like these.
Oh, actually, I'm just talking about the ones we're going to talk about
The-
today.
the
I,
ones
didn't,
we're-
I didn't check everything in the table of contents.
yeah, but we right. So everything is from I would say our formative years.
Yes, those were our formative years.
Yes. So
That makes it exciting too, you know.
So yeah, because there's a lot of references and
Right.
Even the raft that
And there
we'll
are
get to.
some references that are kind of before our time, which we'll get to. But yeah.
So how about Grandma?
Yeah, it's spooky, and it's what I liked about his writing. And I've tried, dabbled into some writing myself. And what I like about his writing is the way he delves into the emotional response of the person in this situation. Here's this kid who's being left. His mom's got to go because his brother has.
So it's not first person, but it's from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy named George.
Yeah, and his older brother broke his leg, and mom's got to go to the hospital to see to him. But that leaves George with Grandma.
Yeah.
Who's an invalid in the bed in the next room that his mom's taking care of.
And pretty scary, and he remembers back to a scary event with her over.
The question is, why is it scary? I mean, just because Grandma's in a bed,
Right.
why is that scary?
Yeah, but you don't really know, but he lets you know.
That he's scared.
He's scared.
So he's what, 8 at the
He's
time?
11.
He's 11,
okay.
right? But the first memory he has of the grandma was when he was 6.
Yes,
and that's
that
the
was
memory
when-
that's big in his mind.
Yes, because she wanted him to come over to get a hug.
Well,
and
come
he-
hug grandma. Come
And he didn't
on.
want to because she's this big, bulbous, fat monster. And he's
Yes.
like, I don't want to go hug this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So right, so he's home. So he's home alone. He's got to check on Grandma. I love the way that time will just not pass,
Yeah.
because he just keeps thinking when
right.
when are they
It's got to
going
be
to get
2
home?
hours. It's been 20 minutes.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So
I also like how confident he was about certain things, doing certain things around the house, like being able to cook dinner, being able to make tea for just certain basic household chores. That this 11-year-old kid, that's easy. Okay, I can cook Grandma's special sodium-free dinner.
Okay.
And nowadays, 11-year-old kids can't make a cup of hot water.
yeah. Now he reflects back not only to the scary moment when he was 6, but also to it's revealed very nicely. I mean, that's how good writing works.
Yeah.
The Grandma's past, and how he and Mom, his brother, and he became caretakers for Grandma.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of
the
a
siblings.
weird story.
So he overhears Mom and her siblings convincing them to take care of Grandma, but there's also some revealing some things of Grandma's past about being kicked out of a church.
Yeah.
Right.
About run out of town.
Not only kicked out of the church, kicked out of working in the school library. Was that what it was? She was a teacher.
Yeah, she was a teacher.
She was kicked out of the
and
school.
they keep referring
kicked out of the
to that
church.
was before the books.
Yes.
So there is some right. So there's
some sneaky
some
thing
books
going on
have
there.
to do with the fact that they were kicked out of towns and churches, and then they were foisted. They all agreed that George's mom should be the one. George's mom Ruth should be the mom. So they've been living with her.
But and we find out later there's a secret reason why George's mom should be the one to deal with her. But and one of the reasons was just the obvious thing that she was the only. She didn't have a husband, and the rest of them could chip in to support her to pay her way to stay there and take care of the mom. But we find out later that there's another secret reason why she's the one that should be in charge of Grandma.
Oh, well, I'm not even sure what that is. We'll get to it. So he does find Grandma unresponsive.
Yes.
and just what do you do? And then he covers her face. He says, he says he sees people do that on TV.
And everything
what am I
is
supposed to do?
Yeah, everything is measured by how will his older brother react to what he's done.
Who he detests, who's a bully.
And idolize at the same time.
Yes.
Right.
So Grandma's hand falls below the sheet, so now it's just hanging down. What does he do? Does he just leave it there? Does he put it back? He's very, very worried about the whole thing, and then he
finds out that she's dead by first of all,
he says, "I've seen this before."
Yeah, he looks to see if she's breathing, and then he puts a mirror in front of her face.
I've seen that on TV.
Yeah, to see if there's any moisture on the mirror, which is a clever thing to do to find out if she's breathing. He finds out she's not breathing, and then he's trying to decide, okay, do I call the doctor? Do I, what do I do?
And then how does he end up talking to Aunt Flo?
Well, he tries to call the doctor, and the phone is dead.
Now, here's an interesting detail about the phone. This is the thing that's a little before our time. It was a party line phone.
6-party line. There were 6 parties.
We didn't grow up that way. I mean, I didn't grow up that way.
6 families shared one
line.
telephone number.
Yeah, and for those of you in the audience who don't know what that means that if you had a phone, you picked up the phone, somebody else might be talking on there. And you could listen in to somebody else's conversation, which of course is rude.
And then you would have to just wait your turn.
Or you could get on and say, "Hey, guys, I need to make an emergency call. Can you guys get off?"
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
correct.
So that was the party line. Yeah, so he's wondering what should he do to deal with Grandma being dead, and then the really spooky thing happens.
So he goes in and he goes, "All right, I'm going to take that dangling hand, and I'm going to put it back in the bed because that's what we should do, and then and cover her up." Mm-hmm. So he goes and he grabs the hand and tries to move it over, and then the hand turns around and grabs him.
Right.
Terrifying.
Yes.
And then, of course, he escapes that, runs and misses the doorway and rams right into the wall and starts bleeding, and then finally gets out into, I guess, to the kitchen, right?
Yeah, and then he gets on the phone and calls his Aunt
Flo.
Aunt Flo that he liked, right?
And she tells him that there's a certain incantation.
Yes, and she kind of knows what's going on. So that's when we start to realize that there's this deep secret. And apparently George's mother was the best at getting Grandma to calm down in her bad times.
Okay, so that's why she was...
That's why she was the best one to watch.
You're right, and she was a single mom with no great means of supporting, and so I see. So... now, this was... So in this incantation, there's this appeal to Hastur, which I found out just by trying to get a summary for this, is a nod to Lovecraft.
Oh, interesting.
Hastur is one of the gods or old ones or whatever in the pantheon. Yes, which you could imagine that Stephen King would be a huge fan of.
Sure,
of Lovecraft.
because writers read a lot.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So
I didn't think of that. That's clever. Yeah.
Yeah, that is good. I didn't know. I wouldn't. I would have caught that. So he. So he says this the incantation.
Yeah, it doesn't really work.
Right.
Yeah, and so we're left with this idea that something spooky has happened to him.
Right. She dies, and he feels empowered in some way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So after he tries to put back the hand, she sort of starts to come back alive. She starts to look a little bit differently, a little bit younger. She starts to get her capacities, and she gets out of bed and goes to that mahogany chair or the vinyl chair?
I don't know.
And then she starts walking towards the guy, George.
Yeah.
And then...
But I got the impression that there was like this family history of some spirit that kind of possesses a certain person and then is passed on to somebody else.
Yes.
And that spirit of Grandma has now been passed on to George.
Right.
And George is super excited about it towards the end.
Exactly. First it's terrifying, and then where does he think he's going to apply his new powers?
Oh, against his brother, of course.
Next time he tries to watch
it.
In a way, there's like a weird upbeat to the end of it. He's kind of... I think this is going to go pretty good.
Yeah, it was a pretty spooky story, and very well done in terms of the setup.
Very good. Now,
do we want to talk about the symbolism now, or should we wait until we go through all the all
go
of
for
the.
it. What
I mean, do you have
symbolism?
something particular about this one?
Well, what I was going to say is that a little background. There was a professor in a small Maine college who thought that Stephen King needed to be taught in colleges and universities, and he was the first one to do it, and he was the first one to create sort of the first class on Stephen King. And one of the things that he really did was say that Stephen King is one of the best commentators on American society, mid-20th, late 20th century American society. And looking at it from that lens, you can see this grandma is really about a couple of things. One of them is that we are terrified as a culture about old people. About getting old, about old age. And that's sort of manifested in it. We don't teach our kids to be part of, old people's lives.
Because unlike other cultures, unlike other cultures, generally speaking, we don't have multi-generational families.
Yeah, that's right.
Old people
That's
are
right.
part of-
So I think that's part of what he, if you look at it from 500 miles high, that's part of what he's looking at is the fact is that old age looks
Scarable.
grotesque and full of just weirdness and mystery and look at this gobulous woman who takes over this little boy's body, and so I think there is a lot of that. So I would just say this is the first of King's, because there's a couple other stories you read, I think, that looks at time and looks at that. So
Okay, that's good.
So we'll get back to it.
All right.
Yes, we will. All right, so I apologize for the survivor type.
Yes, that was a rough
which,
one.
That was great.
One of the first thing I saw about this was probably one of the most disturbing stories you'll ever read. And then I found King himself says, as far as short stories are concerned, I like the grisly ones the best. However, the story survivor type goes a little bit too far, even for me.
It does go kind of.
So I said, well, we're reading that one.
Yeah.
That's definitely good.
So it was good to read it because it definitely explored some interesting concepts. But
so this is very first person because he's writing in
he's writing his own journal, right?
And so he's Richard Pine, who was not raised Richard Pine. He had an Italian name,
right,
from Little Italy, and this guy is a smart guy.
He's a horrible person,
and a psychopath.
Yeah.
I mean, he really doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't relate to normal people in normal terms. He's very much whatever is good for me is good. And but he rises up from this poor neighborhood to become a doctor.
Yes.
Good for him.
And of course, as a doctor, he abuses his ability to prescribe medicine and steals drugs and does. He's a horrible person.
Right. I mean, and he comes from inner city, poor community. I guess the Italian community. I don't know which one.
Chip on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Chip on the shoulder.
Parents.
Hates his
He's
parents.
all around bad person.
And
unlikable person.
He gets through medical school selling drugs and doing a whole bunch of other nefarious things, and he's like, yeah, I could have got rid of that, but I guess I'm in the habit, of doing that. So do we want to go and talk, just quickly run through the summary, the plot? He's on a shipwreck.
Right. So hold on. No, but before he gets disbarred. He loses his medical license. But he's already into the drug dealing business.
Right.
So he's got a connection in Thailand,
something like that. Yeah.
And he's going to come on a pleasure cruise.
Yeah.
With some heroin, and he has the plan as how he's going to drop it off in the San Francisco harbor, because he paid off people to get out of the east, but there's no plan to get it through customs in San Francisco. But he's got another plan. Boom, 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 boom.
So he's on this ship, and he's got all this heroin.
So ship sinks. He's just one of the guys. Of course, there's no women and children first with this guy.
No, this guy's like, save myself, and who cares about everybody else, right?
He gets a survival boat that's got some supplies on it, and goes to a tiny island. This island is like the size of a football field.
He doesn't even go to the island. He just gets washed up.
Right, it's like 200 by 300.
Yeah, it's
really nothing on that island except
nothing
a pile
on the island.
of rocks.
A pile of rocks and
Full of
like
guano,
nothing else.
So there's the medical kit that's on the boat.
Right.
There's the heroin.
And there's some water.
And there's some water.
Yeah.
And he lands.
And he has like his surgical kit or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, maybe his surgical kit with where the heroin was or something. So he's got that, and he. This is very, very revealing. So he kills a gull, which is perfectly fine. It's not much to eat. That's fine.
Couldn't find a fish.
But he thinks to himself the next time, he goes, next time I get one, I'm going to torture it first.
I tell you, he's a horrible man.
Why is that your thought on this island?
Yeah.
I didn't torture the first one. The next time I get one.
Yeah, he's a horrible person. So he ends up having to kill the gull with a stone. Okay, fine. You got to kill the bird.
Yeah, I get it. That's fine.
That's fine. But yeah, he wants to torture the next one. But he ends up breaking his ankle.
Yes.
In the process.
So that's gonna limit his hunting ability.
Yes.
And so then he really, being a doctor, he knows what's going on here, and he's like, "This is going to get bad."
Yeah.
I gotta amputate.
And he's got the heroin.
But fortunately, he's got anesthesia to a degree.
He's got a whole lot of heroin, and apparently he has enough things to
suture and
what I'm thinking, anesthetic to clean the wound. Like
iodine. He has a thing of iodine.
The iodine, that's what it is. Thank you. Yeah. So he after he breaks his leg, breaks his ankle, he realizes that's all there is to that. So he cuts off and he thinks, prosthetics are getting so much better these days, it'll be okay.
Yeah, you're not that worried. Wait a minute. What's the opening quote to the?
I don't know.
To the story. Come on, because
so he ends up cutting off his foot in this process. Go ahead and look up that quote. Yeah. And he's sitting on this island, and the whole time I'm thinking, what would I do if I was stuck on
exactly.
An
I mean, this is why I love those survivor things or zombies or whatever, right? Because that's what you do. You just say,
what would I do? I think I could do better. I think I could catch some fish,
Yes.
Yeah. Or I could build a boat, or I could do something, other than what he's doing. But the story... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, do you got it?
No, I didn't find it.
All right.
Glasses.
So the quote is, sooner or later the question comes up in every medical student's career. How much shock trauma can the patient stand? Different instructors answer the question in different ways, but cut to its base level, the answer is always another question. How badly does the patient want to survive?
Right. Okay. And this guy wants to survive.
Yes. So, I mean, when you're talking about what would I do? Cutting off my own foot?
Yeah.
Well, if you're of that mind where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to lay here and die.
Yeah.
As opposed to the mind that says, I'll cut off my own dang foot before I'll die.
Right.
And then, after he cuts his foot off,
we have to say it's a little easier in his situation because he's got all this heroin. I mean, there are stories
and doctor
of guys,
skills.
Yeah, and doctor skills. There are stories of guys who have no doctor skills and no drugs who cut off their own arm to survive. That's a little tougher.
And I think, an important part of the story is he describes the amputation. Yeah. And he describes it as only being able to get through it because he was so high on heroin. Mm-hmm. And he starts to, and that is really, and he describes being on heroin as the greatest thing in the world. Right. He just enjoyed, he didn't even care about losing his foot. He was so excited about just being on heroin. And that really just kicks him into just doing heroin over and over again.
Yeah, but before he gets heroin over and over again, he realizes, wow, food is becoming pretty scarce these days, and...
Yeah, so that's the disgusting thing about this. First, he kills the bird, and he has no fire, so he has to eat the bird raw, okay? And then he eats the second bird raw. Then he has to cut off his foot. And
he eats that raw.
It's not explicit in the text, but you understand that he had to eat his own foot.
And I know, I was expecting that to be the scary graphic part.
Yeah.
But he just whizzes right through.
He does. And he doesn't make it explicit at all. It's never actually clear what he's doing.
There's no roasting the meat and smelling the thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's none of that.
It's just learned, okay. We learned that he basically eats his legs all the way up to the groin.
So then you find out it's the next foot.
Yeah.
Then it's from the knee down.
Right. And he just keeps going.
He's his own earlobes.
Yeah.
the last thing was the earlobes, right?
Well, no, not that. That wasn't the last thing.
No.
Because the one thing he had to protect, because he was a surgeon, he had to protect his hands.
Yeah, he was worried about injuring his hands during this thing because yes, you can get prosthetics
right,
for the
he was
feet.
right.
Yeah.
Worried about the
Fingers.
hands.
Worried about the hands, and then in the end,
Now his mind's gone. He's a drug addict.
right?
And
he's
lady fingers.
has to eat his hands.
Yeah.
Right?
And what is it? I think the last line is they taste just
They
like
taste just like lady fingers. Yeah. So it's a very disturbing.
Jeez.
Story. And it's a horrible man who goes through a horrible situation, and it's a very disturbing
Even though
story.
he's a completely unempathetic person,
Yes.
it is still.
It's still something that
Thank you.
So what do you have as the symbolic meaning or the big meaning, the big themes of Survivor Type?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, one big meaning could be this rotten person kind of got what he was coming to him. That would be a potential meaning. That he's a rotten person that's established all through the story, and he's suffered a horrible, degrading, humiliating death.
Yeah, I think all of those are part of it. But there's also the idea that, of course, drug addiction and our drug problems in America is eating away at our society and our culture. It's destroying us.
Right.
Well, that's a really good point.
It's
Although
eating
I'm
ourselves.
not sure that would be applicable in 1982 quite as much. You think
Sure.
so?
We got a heroin. Actually, the heroin problem was
Crack
worse. Then.
cocaine
Now we've
just
got
showed
new.
up, right?
We got new drugs after that, but
Right.
the 70s was a heroin problem. Okay, the Raft is, according to this one review, said it was the best and the most Kingian story of the collection.
One thing that I thought was very interesting in reading these stories was you're trying to decide which of the elements that he decides to explain, details, are things that are meaningful and which are things that are just giving color to the story.
Yeah.
Right? And it's going to come up again in a different story later on. But one of the things that you have to wonder about when you're reading King's stories is he uses a lot of explanation of, he's got this guy who's smoking one cigarette and he's got another one in his ear for later on, and you're wondering, is that just a detail or is that a
But that's what it makes great writing, because even though these are short stories, he establishes the relationships between the people. There's
creates a very believable world.
Yes.
Everything means something and it combines together. I mean, that's how Hemingway always looked at it, as the great writing. And I think, in a way we can discuss this later, but I think Stephen King could be considered, a great writer.
I thought he was a great writer.
Yes, I think the knock would be what separates him from real literature is all of this scary, you're just a scary writer.
That's right.
And it's not just, it's scary, but it's also, he introduces supernatural elements and it's spooky stuff.
Right. And so, okay, that's fine, that's good, everything, but it's really, these are fun, entertaining, high-selling books. That's
it's
fine.
It's just kind of pedestrian.
But does it really rise to the level of literature?
Yeah.
I think.
And my main professor friend, which I forgot his name, and I just saw him on a show one time 10 years ago, would say, no, King, I'm teaching King in college classes because he has something really important to say to American society. But we could get into that afterwards.
All right, so so it's 4 college students. Right?
Randy, Deke, Rachel, and Laverne.
And Laverne, yes. And they're going out to the lake for one last swim, and it's October.
Right.
And this is a summer lake community. This is New England, so
nobody's living there anymore.
Nobody's living there. That's important. And there is an anchored raft about 50 yards out, which is far but not far, right?
And you're
Anybody can do it, but it's far enough that it's just not right there.
Right. So they go to a lake that was a summer resort, and the raft is where all the kids would swim to, and they jump off. And
Come on, one last time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So one last time, let's do it again.
And Deke is the high school football partying, pot smoking kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And he's the one. He drives the fancy car.
He's got the Camaro or whatever.
And he's got the girl. He's got the girls and everything else. He's the. And then
Mm-hmm.
Randy is kind of the egghead sidekick.
Right.
To Deke.
Is this? Yes,
Yeah.
that's good. He's the sidekick. They're good. They're good friends, but
Yeah.
there's a little hierarchy here.
Pancho Cisco.
Pancho
thing.
Cisco,
Yeah.
and they play that up, and they enjoy that. And Randy is not really with the other girl, Laverne, but he
So
wouldn't mind.
there's some sexual tension going
Sexual
on. There's
tension.
some jealousy going on.
There's some stripping down of clothes in
Right.
order to swim out there.
Yeah.
Water's cold. It's October,
Yeah.
but they make it out there. No big deal.
But yes, except that Deke makes it, Randy makes it, the girls are lagging behind, and then Randy gets concerned about this thing he sees out in the water.
Yeah, kind
It
of like an
seems to be-
oil slick.
Yeah, kind of, but it's coming towards the raft, and he has
Right.
some kind of fear about this. I don't know exactly why, it's not clear, but he wants them to get out of the water quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
He gets them out of the water fast because he's afraid of this thing.
Yeah. So now they're wet, kind of cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's 55 degrees out.
And this thing appears to have some agency.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's not just a random thing floating around. It comes
it's a
towards the
circular
raft.
oil slick,
Yeah.
right?
And it comes towards the raft, but it's not just an oil slick, because apparently when you look at it closely,
Yeah.
it changes colors and
there's
becomes
some
kind of hypnotic.
yes, there's
Right.
some
I
shimmering.
think that's really
going
important.
on.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So the first person who
Did somebody fall in?
So
No, it's Deke.
Is it? No, it's Rachel, right? Rachel looks into the circle blob and sees the colors and gets enchanted with it, and then she kind of like leans over
and touches it,
and touches it, and that's when
it grabs
Climbs up her
pulls
arm.
her.
and climbs up her arms, pulls her in, and just sort of devours.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. It was Rachel who went first, and Randy wanted to like jump in and help her, and Deke is like, no, she's already gone. You know,
Right.
she's dead. Deke is kind of in that part of the story revealed as a bit of a coward.
Right. But although probably the right move.
Yeah,
right?
it was the right move, but
Right.
still a bit of a coward.
Right.
you
He
know,
didn't
like,
go with his impulsive, heroic.
Yes.
antics, but yeah.
Yeah, right. So Rachel gets pulled in and gets gobbled up by this horrible thing, and is
But no blood. Just more like dissolved, right?
Yeah, just dissolved. There's no body left. And the blob gets twice as big.
Yeah.
But it's always in a circular shape, which
Yeah.
is important symbolically. So the next thing that happens is, or the next one to go, we'll put it that way.
Yeah. Is Deke.
Deke is about, so the blob goes underneath the raft.
Right.
And Deke's like, man, this is my time. I'm going to
So it's,
jump in there.
right. So it's board slats.
Yeah.
Right.
On this raft.
And there's gaps
So there's
between
little
the
gaps.
boards. Yeah, and there's this conversation about whether he can swim to the shore and beat the thing there.
Yes.
You know, because it's only 50 yards. You know, so can you swim a fast 50 yards and get away from this thing before
Go get
it
help
follows?
because none of the houses are occupied.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming for us.
But before he's able to do that, the blob comes up between a couple cracks in the board, grabs him, and then there's this
Oh, yeah.
horrible
It is
scene
terrible.
that just progressively, slowly sucks him down through the
Through
cracks.
1 inch
Yeah,
holes.
cracks
You're
in the
right.
board, yeah.
Right. And the only thing that's left
Is his ring. It's-
is his football ring or his
Yeah,
high
it's
school
his
ring?
his high
or-
school ring,
His
yeah.
high school ring.
Yeah, it's a
Which
very
is very also
disturbing.
very symbolic.
It's very disturbing
Important.
and gross. The whole process of him being sucked down through that thing.
So now you just got. Now. When was the groping? Was that earlier? Or
No, that
that's
comes
now.
next.
Oh.
So now this is a weird thing. Here they're in this horrible situation. They're scared to death. 2 people have been killed, and they end up having like this
Make it out.
Sexual encounter.
sexual encounter. It's kind of strange.
But the question is,
While standing, right? Because you don't want to lie down on this
Well,
raft.
but
or-
they do end up lying down.
Okay.
Which is what causes the next problem.
right?
Yeah.
Did the blob have anything to do with them
Being sexually
enhancing-
aroused?
Yeah, to be sexually aroused.
I don't think so. I just attributed it to them being teenagers.
And just Randy.
Randy.
Randy's just Randy.
Yeah.
being Randy.
So when they're down laying on the raft, some of Laverne's hair falls down through the crack, and the blob grabs the hair and starts pulling her in, And Randy is helpless to help her.
And doesn't Randy push her into the water to get it over with?
Well, that's what happens in the YouTube version. I can't remember that in the book.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure that was actually in the book.
So now Randy's standing there by himself. You can't lay down.
Yeah.
Now he's basically standing all night.
Yeah.
Sun comes up, right? And
Blob's there.
Bob's there.
And at the end,
Shimmering and staring at him.
Yeah. And it hypnotizes him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's it. He doesn't fall. It doesn't get consumed. But you don't get the sense that this is going to end well, and
That's
it
right.
sort of ends like that. Now, something. So this is kind of Kingish. Did you care, or would you rather there be some origin story to a meteor that the cause of this thing? Or are you perfectly fine? Just sort of like the Mist, where it's
sort of like
just
Franz
a
Kafka, but
supernatural
metamorphosis, right?
Well,
The guy turns into a cockroach, and we don't care why.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I think that's the same.
It's a very
that's
interesting
the way I read
question.
it.
It's a very interesting question because, on the one hand, you wonder, what is this thing? Where did it come from? Why is it there? How come it doesn't get killed in the summertime?
Right. Was there some leak from a chemical thing that created the thing?
Exactly. So you're on all those questions, but he's uninterested in that.
No.
He's just interested in the horror of it, and here's this monster that you're confronting and how people react to that and where it came from and all that he doesn't care about.
As a reader, were you fine with that, or
I think he sells it to the reader.
No,
I
I was
didn't
fine.
care.
Yeah,
I didn't think about it once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't care.
I got you.
And I think the premise of a Stephen King, when you open a Stephen King book, you know from the beginning there's going to be some horrible, wicked, terrible thing in here. That's just a given.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's a need to explain that. Yeah.
Okay, and so as part of the Creep Show series, there's a bunch of Creep Show movies, which Creep Show is a comic book.
Yeah.
They usually do like 3 or 4 short movies in a Creep Show movie, and this was a 20-minute.
The Raft.
The Raft was a 20-minute of Creep Show that ended differently.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
It was interesting. I think they did it very well. The main difference in the ending was that Randy decided to swim away from the raft and get to the shore.
Does a pretty good job.
Yeah. Although his swimming is awful, just by the way. I mean, come on, put your face in the water. Anyway, so he swims to shore.
That's funny.
He gets out, and he's like a foot away from the edge of the water.
He gets like up to his waist out of the water.
And he's out of the water, but he's only like a foot from the water. And he's like, ha ha, I beat you. And then the thing leaps out of the water and grabs him.
So different choice for the director, but
yeah, of course that's the director's license. But I think that changes the sort of the theme or the symbolism of what the raft stood for. In the story, he never leaves the raft. Mm-hmm. And I think that is meaningful in the story itself for the big picture.
How do you think the raft, not leaving the raft, is meaningful?
Well, I guess I could go right into sort of the big picture. I'll be the main professor. I'll think of him. But I think this, I think the blob, which is a perfect circle, really sort of represents almost something like a mini black hole. And I say that because a black hole is something where time can't get out of. I think it represents something about time. And I think that the whole story is really about as Nick Carraway said to Jay Gatsby, you can't repeat your past. And this is sort of a mini. I'm going to go repeat the summer. I'm going to repeat the past. The summer, I think, is something. Everybody has a great time in the summer. We all love it. We want to go back to the summer when it's fall, but you just can't do it. You're clinging to it, to the summer. You're clinging to your youth. You're clinging to your past. And the blob just sort of represents ain't no going. You can't do that. And I'm going to gobble up everything from your past. And I think that the ring is very symbolic.
Well, because it does seem like they even though they're college students, they reminisce their high school years.
Yeah.
And so, that's where he was. He's no longer the football star. He's just a kid in college
And his
now.
high school ring is the only thing that survives him when
Yep.
he gets sucked through the boards.
And the raft sort of represents, aha, I made it back. I made it back to relive the past. And Stephen King saying, oh, no. There's the black blob that's going to come get you.
All right, very good. All right, we got to get moving here.
interesting. Yeah.
So now these next two are less Stephen Kingy.
Yeah.
And this one, the Jaunt, is less Stephen Kingy in the sense that it's science fiction that he doesn't do a lot
He doesn't
of.
do a lot of science fiction.
So this is a slight departure, but not really.
It's pretty interesting because it deals with teleportation.
Yeah.
Some scientist discovers this way to teleport something from one place to another.
Right. So this is hundreds of years in the future,
Yeah.
but referencing back to the 1987 scientist Victor Karoun, who developed this, and the family that's about to go. He has like a 2-year stint on Mars.
Yeah, so it's Mark Oates
Yeah.
and Marilys Oates and the kids, Ricky and Patty, and he has to go work on Mars for a bit, and the way they do that is they teleport them.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready to do this thing. But in the beginning of the story, it tells us the story of how the scientists discovered this ability to teleport.
Through the dad trying to calm the
Yes,
fears
exactly.
of the
He tells
kids.
them the story.
All right, so Dad, how did this get developed, and who was it? Which is a great technique as a writer
Yes.
to reveal the past.
Yeah, actually, I'd forgotten that, but that's a good point. So they're all basically sitting there getting ready to do the jaunt, and the kids are like, where did this thing come from?
Yeah.
And then he tells them the story, the origin story of the whole jaunt, and that gets interspersed through the narrative, telling how it was developed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you start with inanimate objects, then you move to a worm, and then
A mouse.
right. But once you get to that's where the mouse is where the problem starts.
Yes.
So once you get to higher level things like mammals, it goes pretty poorly.
Yes.
Right.
And that's why they decide, and basically what they discover is that any creature that goes through conscious
Yeah.
dies. So if you're going to do the jaunt, what they do is they line you all up and they put you out, and then you do the jaunt unconscious.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they first tested on humans, they took a death row inmates who were about to be
That's right. They're volunteers to go.
volunteers. I mean, the chances are you survive. If you don't decide to do it, you're going to get executed.
Yeah.
Right.
You might survive.
If you survive, we'll let you
You're
go.
paroled.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal at all. And they all go crazy and die.
Yes. Well, the ones that are not anesthetized.
Yes.
And the one that did, he emerges insane and saying that the time. So it takes a fraction of a second.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you go through this one thing and immediately you're on the other
Yes.
side.
But he comes out saying it was an eternity.
It took forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And he has a heart attack right away, so doesn't really explain what that means.
Right.
But it's a terrible experience if you're conscious, and it's not a big deal if you're anesthetized.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting...
That's symbolic itself, right?
It's an interesting play here on the difference between matter and consciousness, right? Because with
Yep.
regular
Oh, yeah.
things, a pencil or whatever, just go through fine, and there's no problem. But the conscious mind goes through in a completely different way and experiences this travel, however it's done, as this incredibly long stretch of time. It's almost like the consciousness is slowly traveling the distance, but the physical object just goes through immediately.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So, the daughter is very cautious and scared, and the son is revealed to be a pet of a daredevil.
Yes.
And so it's Stephen King.
Yeah.
You know this is not going to go well in some way.
Something's gonna go wrong.
Something's going to go wrong, but I didn't predict that it would go this way. But
Yeah.
you're like, all right, the teleportation is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
But I don't know what.
Yeah.
And so, how does it go?
Yeah, so little Ricky decides he wants to see what it's like inside the void between here and there. So he pretends to he doesn't take the medicine or whatever it is, and he pretends to go to sleep, and then he goes through the jaunt, and on the other side, he's crazy.
He's crazy,
and he dies quickly.
He says, longer than you think. Longer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you've heard of locked in syndrome. So you're fully conscious of what's going on, but you can't interact with anyone.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's like that for 1,000,000 years, and it's just a whiteout and you and your own thoughts.
Wow.
I mean, what is worse than that? I mean, in terms of setting up a horrifying scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't hardly get any worse than that.
Yeah, I kind of like my own thoughts for a day or two, but for 1,000 years, I don't think so.
So he comes out and he's crazy too, and he's wheeled away by some attendants, and there you go.
And this one is about time too, right?
It is, and it's also an interesting play on what is consciousness about. Why is consciousness different from regular material things?
Yeah. That's good. Okie dokie. So now this one is also very different, very very non-kingish, called The Reach, and it's suitably the last book of the last story of the book, and I thought it was great.
It was very interesting. So
it's a reach for Stephen King because the horror wasn't really there at all.
No, it was what's her name? She lives on an island.
Stella Flanders.
She just recently celebrated her 95th birthday and has never left the island.
Right.
She's the oldest resident.
Some little tiny island called Goat Island.
Off of the coast of Maine.
Yeah.
The coast of Maine. And The Reach is that little strip of land between water
between the
and
two.
And it's what, a mile across?
4 miles, I think.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. And you can take a boat over there easily, and every once in a while it freezes.
And she's getting senile, and certain things she remembers, certain things she doesn't. But she does keep coming back to the 1938, the last time it froze. So she remembers this event, and frequently the grandkids and other people will say, how come
you've never left the island?
I mean, you really never. What about 1938 when you had that chance?
And we got to say, she has advanced stage cancer, and so she's sort of in and out, and the story sort of takes us through, flashbacks or in and out and different things. But it's all very easily followed.
And she always says, they ask her, Grandma, well, how come you never left the island? And her response is always, I have everything I need here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anything over there. I've got friends, I've got family, I've got the radio, I've got the television. I don't need anything.
The time that she had the chance, she said it was washing day. I had things to do that day.
That's right.
So this is there are lots and lots of characters for a short story. They're hard to keep track of, but you don't really need to
that was something that actually surprised me, was how many characters there were in this story. There were 35 different characters.
I know.
And detailed descriptions of their relationships and who they were. And
but in a way, I felt like when you're in a crowd of people, I mean, you don't need everybody's backstory to know that you're in a crowd of people. So there's this community. There's things that are coming and going, and she's related to him. And there was that time. I remember when they shouldn't have gone out on the ice, and the thing went through, and then he died, and so it's just a big sense of community and a fulfilling community in terms of.
There was a lot of.
I was going to say wonderful vignettes of meaningful times for her. And meaningful times of her reaction and relationship and interaction with the community.
Yes, and it gave you all the little details about this guy who had this hat and this guy who did it. All these little things made it very rich and made a very believable community.
It was a lovely story.
Yeah.
So it freezes again.
Yeah.
So here towards the end of the story, she has been coughing up blood. Her parents both died of cancer or something. There's some link that I mean, she's 95 and she's dying of
Exactly,
cancer. I mean, her going over to the island to the hospital isn't really
Not her thing.
doing anybody any good. So she bundles up in the storm. It's frozen with what's her son's name?
Bill, isn't it?
Is it yes?
No, Bill is her late husband.
Oh yeah.
So Bill is the one who invites her to walk across the reach, and which is spooky, of course, because Bill's been dead for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and so she wears Bill's long underwear, right, and dresses up for the trip, and he invites her out, and they kind of start walking.
So they make lots of references to the wind almost blowing off Alden's hat. So it's Alden's hat that she's trying to keep on, and she's trying to. And she's not really sure she's walking the right direction because there's a white out.
Yes, and actually that was prefigured earlier in the story that if you're going to do this, you better take a compass. To make sure you're going the right way, and she doesn't, of course. Yeah.
So she's stuck in the middle of the reach, and of course, she gets weaker and weaker, and that's when she starts to
seeing more people who have passed.
Right, and she gets excited about it.
And they're okay, and everybody's like,
okay.
come on over.
Yeah, and I think Bill's the first one she sees, and he gives her, she loses Alden's hat, it blows away in the snow, and he gives her his hat. And she puts that on, but then she sees all these people from her past who have died, and they're all around her, and they all kind of walk with her.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the interesting, you want to skip to the end?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is
she's found not on the island, right? She's found
on the mainland.
On the mainland.
So
That's
she made
important.
it. She made it across, and they found her frozen to death wearing Bill's hat.
Right.
Which is a very interesting little touch there. So that somehow she got Bill's hat.
So there are ghosts. There's an old woman freezing to death, if you want to call that Stephen King spooky stuff. But all in all, it was kind of sweet.
Yeah, it was, because I mean she's 95 years old. She doesn't have much time to live anyway.
She connected with the people that meant the most to her, and. You had a sense that she lived a fulfilling life without ever leaving Goat Island.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that was a very pleasant story.
Yes, it really was. So in a way, I would say, a bit of a kind of a reach for Stephen King, and he knocked it out of the park.
Right. So
here's his range.
Going back to my main professor friend.
Okay.
Of course,
nameless apparently.
Right. I can't remember who he was. Of course, the reach symbolizes the crossing from life to death, and that's simple to do. But I also think there is a little bit of symbolism of dying communities. That this was a very isolated community that. Everybody took care of each other. A lot of the vignettes talked about that. Yeah. And then there was also talk about
now young people tend to move away.
Moving away, going across that. So I think that's also part of it. And I also think the ice, the freezing over of the reach is also sort of that allows for the bridge between the mainland, which is sort of the destruction of your beautiful, cute, tight-knit community and everything. So I think there's a little bit of that in there. But overall, I think it's a story about an old woman dying, and it's a very positive story, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because it's not like Grandma. It's not like Deke, man.
Very good. Well, good job, and thank you for your insight there, Longinus. That's why you're allowed on the show.
Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.